All right, let's get started.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. First of all, we'd like to say from the team Dapper Dollars, we want to give a big thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have you here. Before we get started, let's quickly cover some housekeeping rules. If you're joining us from Riverside link or app, and you're not one of those two amazing speakers for today, please go ahead and mute your mic. And to our viewers tuning in through the YouTube's live stream, your mics should already be muted. If not, now's the time to make it happen. So finally, if you do have any burning questions for our speakers, please hang on to them until the end. We've saved some time for Q&A, so we'll give you your chance to ask them. And then finally, now that we've gotten all that out of the way, let's welcome our very first fireside chat. So this is the first series, which is really designed to help you all gain valuable insights and gather knowledge that you can use to level up your career. That's why we're launching this Leadership Insight series. In this series, we're all about empowering you with tips and strategies straight from the industry leaders. Well, what is our mission here? Well, we want to create an inclusive space where meaningful conversations happen, which include leadership growth, mentorship, and career advancement. We're here to build a community where you can learn, connect, and develop the skills you need to thrive in your career journey. So, why did we choose mentorships and sponsorships to kick off our series? Well, hopefully, my personal experience will help you paint this picture. For those who don't know me, I'm Anirban Bomik, and I'm one of the founders of Dapper Dollars. Mentorship has been a huge part of my life, and I've been personally touched by its power. As a younger brother, I've been lucky enough to have an older brother who's always been there to guide me. Having someone who's more experienced and more wiser to lean on and showed me that there's always someone there willing to help, share their wisdom, and offer their support. And that's exactly what I did to help me navigate in different chapters of my life. For example, I found somebody who helped me balance my academic and social life while still graduating cum laude in engineering. And at work, I found a mentor who connected me to the right people, helping me land the role that I've been aiming to land. And so mentorship, as you can see, has been the key to my successes. And that's why I'm so excited to dive into this topic today. And with that, I'll hand it over to my partner, George, to introduce himself.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So thank you for being here. I am George Anakwe. I'm also the co-founder of Dapper Dollars, and I'm also a passionate advocate for professional development and financial empowerment. And so I'll say throughout my career, this is from navigating the financial landscapes of Europe to leading strategic initiatives within AWS. I've learned that success is just about skills. It's not just about skills, actually. It's about the relationships we build along the way. So growing up in Nigeria, moving across continents for my education, my career, I faced my share of challenges. This is including culture shocks, ever-present imposter syndrome. What helped me navigate these complexities were the mentors who offered guidance and the sponsors who championed my potential. So these pivotal relationships, I'll say, didn't just shape my career, they really transformed how I see myself and my capacity to succeed. So today, as we dive into this topic, mentorship and sponsorship, I'll say it's not just about climbing the ladder, it's about the various voices that uplift you, insights that stir you, the opportunities that push you forward. And I've seen firsthand how a mentor and a sponsor can break down barriers, open doors. And that's why I'm excited to have this conversation. I would say I'm looking forward to this enriching conversation with our incredible panelists as well. So thank you all for joining us.
All right, now let's get on to our guests. So let's welcome our both guests. So I'll start with Shruti Shah. Shruti is the Director of Finance for Data Center Planning and Delivery at Amazon Web Services. She's joined Amazon since 2011, and Shruti has led multiple finance roles, driving investment decisions and optimize resources for AWS's global data centers. She brings a rich background in finance, including experience at Barclays Capital, where she started her adult career journey and holds an MBA from Carnegie Mellon University. Beyond her professional accomplishments, Shruti is passionate about mentoring and guiding others, and that's why she's here with us. And when she's not taking care of her two kids, she enjoys gardening, cooking, reading, and exploring with her family. And then also we have Jawanza. And Jawanza is the vice president at AT&T in Global Workplace Services. With over 23 years at AT&T, Jawanza excels in leveraging advanced technology to optimize operations, streamline real estate management, and enhance security systems. Known for his expertise in business transformation, Juwanza brings a metric based, results driven approach to leadership, supported by his Six Sigma Black Belt certification. Juwanza has also been dedicated leader outside of his core role, serving on various nonprofit boards and employee resource groups, earning numerous awards for innovation and employee engagement. He holds degrees in industrial engineering from Florida State University and Georgia Tech. And outside of work, Juwanza enjoys golf, investing, and speaking on topics of legacy and leadership. So let's join us in welcoming both Shruti Shah and Juwanza Watt.
Welcome both, and again, it's such an honor, having the both of you here. So I think I'll kick off, and I want to start with the basics. So we literally set the foundation for our conversation today. So mentorship, sponsorship, these are terms often used, but they play a distinct and very critical role in professional growth. So can you explain the difference in your perspective between mentorship and sponsorship and why both are important for career growth? Jones, I'd love to start with you. Okay.
Okay, excellent. Well, George and Urban, I just want to say to both of you, thank you for having us. Thanks for hosting us, whether it's through your family, your brother, through your travel experiences. This goal of bringing financial empowerment in a simple way to folks is very powerful, and I admire you all for what you've done to start this. And I'm also honored to be on here with Shruti. So, thank you. Uh, Regarding your question, so the distinction mentorship versus sponsorship, I like to use with mentor the word coach. And sometimes people think about coach like an executive coach. No, I'm thinking about somebody like a coach, like somebody you might have in high school sports, somebody that offers guidance, advice, support that can help you grow. Oftentimes, that person can be behind the scenes. Sometimes they may be a friend. Generally, they're going to be more exposed and more experienced, potentially more seasoned than you. But they kind of have a been there, done that perspective that can assist you in growing in your career. With sponsor, I like to think of the word champion, somebody that actively advocates for you in front of others, uses their influence to help you gain opportunities in certain rooms. They may be in certain rooms where they're able to advocate for your opportunities, promotions, visibility. That's how I see a sponsor. And yes, I've benefited from both of those for sure in my career.
I appreciate that. I like that. There's that distinction. So a coach and a champion. Shruti, do you care to opine on this as well? And also, I would love to tack on a follow up. How have you also personally benefited from these in your own space as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would double down on those two distinctions where one is a coach, mentor is working with you, can be peers, but someone usually more experienced and working with you. And sponsors are your champions or someone who is advocating for you when you are not there as well. So kind of working for you, working behind the scene in places where you can't be. So I think I'm completely aligned on those two distinctions as well. So I'll share an example on both the cases because mentorship and sponsorship have benefited me at Amazon for sure over 13 years and also over my life here. So, an example of mentorship very early in my career, I'm going to talk about peer mentors because those are typically less understood. But um, early in my career, I was working and kind of trying to ask good questions to understand like how do we think about these investment strategy like in finance I'm kind of responsible for asking those questions and I was not doing a very good job. And my peer, who was my coworker as well, pulled me aside and said, like, hey, I see you are noticing these questions you're asking are really good, but you are just putting too many qualifiers, you're not articulate, and you're not coming across as a thoughtful leader when your questions are really, really good. And guess what? Someone else is just building on that questions and getting more credit for it. And that was such an insightful observation she had because I was just talking to her to the point on career building is like, how do I become more effective in influencing and decision making? So that turned into a really great peer mentorship opportunity where she was observing me, coaching me, and kind of guiding me along the way for a while. And that advice has stayed with me for a while and it has helped me just in not just lateral and vertical movement, but just in many aspects of life where how do you want to be thoughtful in asking questions as well. Sponsorship worked for me differently when I was looking for different opportunities. And a lot of my roles, I talk about it, has not been a formal interviews, but more like my sponsors advocating for me and saying, hey, now in your career, have you spoken with this person? Go try this roles. Or, hey, I reached out because someone else recommended your name and you're looking to rotate, or if you're looking to rotate, I would love to chat. So sponsors have helped me out a lot in that kind of finding the next role or how I should think about it. And we will talk more about them. But just wanted to make sure I shared those two examples that has helped me with 13 years here at Amazon.
Brilliant. I appreciate that.
That's great. Hey, so I'm glad you differentiated between mentorship and sponsorship. So I think it can get kind of confusing for somebody to figure out who would be that right advocate or who would be that right coach.
Mhm.
So what qualities would you recommend with that someone should look for when asking or seeking for that mentor or sponsor? So Juwanza, you can start us off and then we'll follow with Shruti.
Uh, Number one, you may have mentor sponsors in different walks of life. As it pertains to your career, you're going to want somebody who, as I said earlier, is in the room and has some degree of responsibility for career advancement. So that's number one. You want to look for somebody that has that capability and exposure. Secondly, connection. So look for common ground to find a connection with somebody. All of us have a common ground, whether it's an older brother, whether it's travel, whether it's the joy of reading and gardening. There's some common ground that you can find with everyone. And I think that's the second piece.
Awesome.
How about you, Shruti?
I mean, I'll just build on that. Absolutely. Those common grounds that we are talking about is a place where you start building a relationship. One of the things, what we are talking about here is a long-term relationship. It's not a transactional, like sponsorship and mentorship takes time because people are going to coach you, going to invest in you. They want to know you. So building on a common ground is important, and it can be anything, right? Like we talked about gardening or outdoor activities to travels to whatever is that common ground you want to find there. Other point I would add is someone you look up to, right? For me, sometimes I feel like who do I want to emulate in my leadership style, in my working style, and who is a good manager that I would want to be that manager. So looking out for those qualities is another kind of how you want to seek out those leaders. I just want to make sure it's not someone who's definitely look like you or acts like you. Sometimes you want to be different, but you can find those people where like, "Yeah, I respect this person in these areas," and then you seek those people as mentors. So that common ground is the first step, but also make sure you have it's an like aspirational aspect to it as well.
And quick thing about that, do you have, I know we're really transitioning from that hybrid to full time, but also there's a lot of companies that are also in that virtual environment. So interacting in person has been a lot harder. And so, you mentioned about someone having a network and you can tell that this person has a larger sphere of influence. So that's the person you might be attracted to. But the building that connection is also a bit harder also virtually. So how would you recommend somebody to identify that when it's so hard to in a virtual space?
I'll go first. It's a good question because building virtual presence and knowing who is going to advocate for you behind the room is also hard. Uh, the flip side is you also get access to diverse and bigger pools, right? So one of the first step is you use that common ground to reach out to an introduction to say like, hey, I'm trying to work on this project. I would like to have more discussion with you. And I'm going to pick George's example because that's how we got to know each other, right? This was a project outside of my usual scope of work, but he reached out to me to say, hey, I'm leading this space. Would you be willing to work and help us out in this? And that's how kind of you have more tangible things to talk about over time and you build relationships. So even if it is virtually, you use those moments and specific items to kind of start building those relationships. So it does not become like a transactional to say, can you be my
Yeah,
XYZ, right? It's like, hey, I'm working on this project, more interaction time. So I want to leave that as kind of the foundational principle on initiating any of these, like find something tangible to work on together so they have observation points or interaction points.
love that.
I love that. Joanne, so do you care to add to that as well?
I think that uh, the, the days of the distinction between being remote or in person and being able to cultivate a relationship are of the past, right? And so, while I do think that in-person presence is very meaningful and powerful, I think that there's just a strong capability to build those kinds of relationships virtually. And I will double down on what Shruti said around when thinking about a mentor or a sponsor, do be sure that you're creating a diverse network
Mm.
of people to fill in those roles, whether it's gender, ethnicity, religion, whatever that may be. It's really easy for us. I shouldn't say easy. It's almost natural for us to gravitate towards folks who are very similar to us in a lot of ways. But your mentor sponsor network should be very diverse.
Brilliant, brilliant. I appreciate that. And I think it's making me want to double click on a few things. I know keywords were mentioned, finding that common ground, building a diversity in network. But I think as well, work has to be done in actually building that relationship first. So to play the devil's advocate. So if you reach out to a mentor sponsor, it's also left for you to also earn their trust.
Mhm.
And I know Anna has spoke about just the space we're in now. You have on-site and hybrid being attached to roles these days, virtual to remote. How would you really recommend initiating a relationship with a potential sponsor and mentor? Let's talk about your experience, especially within the settings we have now within our workplace. And as a follow-up, what are mistakes you would advise folks to avoid if they're going about to seek a potential sponsor and mentor? Shruti, I'd like to have you start with that question.
Yeah, I think the first step, we talked a lot about finding the right sponsor. And then once you have zeroed in, like these are the individuals I would like to go, send them, use that common ground to send an introductory note to say, hey, I know you spoke here, or I saw you discuss, you presented here. Let's assume those are not in spheres of your working group, right? So I'll put it in two buckets. Let me start there. One, which somehow you're working on big projects. They can be not necessarily in your chain of command or your kind of manager's chain of command, but someone who you just have worked in your manager's kind of sphere, your organization spheres, and you are kind of like, hey, we were in this meeting, we talked about this, can I work with you on this aspect? I would love to learn. You did this is what That's one way to kind of trigger the relationship. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I attended this virtual talk, or we were presenting here. This idea really resonated with me. Can I really set up time with you to take your take? And those are like, I'm putting those two kind of like trigger points. And that is just a start of how you make the introductions. And again, be intentional. I think Joanza mentioned that earlier as well. Like you have to be intentional in these interactions. So you're setting expectation on the other end to say, what are you expecting out of this relationship?
Brilliant.
It also helps if you already have someone that's looking to be a mentor. Uh, Here at AT&T, and I think many companies have what you call mentor circles. And the folks that are facilitating those circles have already kind of raised their hand to say, hey, I'm willing to be a mentor. So find somebody that's got their hand up, right? That's a great way to start. And then in terms of pitfalls to avoid, uh, if you do reach out to somebody and they don't respond, don't take that as no, right? So, and sometimes we make the mistake of sending a note and assuming that that's communication. Communication is two-way. If I send something, that is not communication. I sent something. That's all that is. When somebody responds, now you've started to engage in a conversation. Just because you send somebody something, don't assume if you don't get a response that somehow they have some opinion or perspective. The reality is they may not have even read it.
I appreciate that. And I have a personal tie into that. So working in England, like the communication style is different. So coming to corporate America and you send emails, and I thought, hey, I'm not trying to be rude, but one email, no response, I let it be. So I had to actually go relearn, send a couple of emails first. Then you know that, hey, together. But I really do appreciate that. I think it's really like just doing that work behind the scene. It does go a long way. So thank you both. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And to me, it just feels like we're kind of talking about this process in you can kind of apply it in like a dating aspect, right? So like just because you're looking for your mentor or aka your partner, it's not because from that first interaction you're going to be able to immediately find that click and then be able to play. It's a more of a working progress in building that relationship until you can get to that step of really whether it's the mentor or the sponsor role that they're going to play. So now, let's just switch those roles. And now, let's say if this person and this audience member is really wanting to um, look into being more of a mentor or a sponsor. So, what advice would you give to those professionals looking from that transition from being a mentee to becoming the mentor or sponsor themselves? So, Juwanza, I'll let you start with this one.
Uh, so I think one of the things is it's important to what extent you can become a thought leader in some sort of space, right? That that makes you it puts you in a position where you're sought after, right? And and so that's a way to draw people is to become some thought leader, whether it's in artificial intelligence or networking or whatever it may be. That's a way to draw people in. The second thing is most of the time, folks look for mentors who uh, are leaders, right, or manage other people, have been through some experience of managing people in their career. Uh, Oftentimes, we make this mistake though. Um, we're promoted to where we become a manager of people, but we're never trained in how to be a leader, right? And so all we know oftentimes is we're in charge, right? But a real leader, and I got this from Simon Sinek, is not so much about being in charge as much as about caring for those that are in our charge, right? And so there is some development, leadership training that somewhere along the way you've got to invest in. And when I say invest, I mean make an exchange, right? Pay some money to take a class to learn to learn more leadership facets, skill sets, read books, listen to audiobooks, but definitely to the extent you can invest in yourself to where you can become a little bit more of a thought leader. That way you're sought after by people.
I mean, I would just jump in right here because this is a gold mine of like advice that's been just been given because people assume certain things that I'm a manager of someone and so I can mentor people. Those are not the same thing. Like you need to be recognized as a thought leader and you need to invest time. And I think that's the another myth I want to bust. Like people's like my company has to pay for it and someone else will pay for it. No, invest in yourself. This is the time. Pay for those classes, pay for some of these small, and this is the world when information is so readily available, like, and including some of the podcast series that you all are running here has such good advice. Like, invest your time, invest your money, then become that thought leader so that people will seek you out. And then you have to raise your hand sometimes. I think Juanza raised this earlier. Like, there are mentorship circles or mentorship groups and programs available in major corporate places right now that says like, hey, I'm raising my hands, I'll lead the circle. You need to invest time to become that, and you need to be recognized for something. The other piece I do want to kind of highlight is we talk a lot about people management, but you also can be a thought leader in certain skill sets, right? And I kind of use this example quite a bit, I lead finance organizations, and not everyone comes with the same level of skill sets to do financial analysis and modeling. So just using that as an example, there are best in class like financial people who knows how to think about these complex decisions. They can be your skill set mentors, and there are like different times when you need those mentors, and I've sought them out to say, hey, I love these models or love how you thought about it, how do you do that? So identify those skills, become that person as well where you are recognized for that skill set, and then raise your hands to say, I can lead this in your organization. Trust me, your manager or your leaders are looking for those people to say, can you lead this session? Bring those ideas. That's how you become mentor. And then over time, you become sponsors as well to say, hey, I've worked with these group of people. Again, becoming sponsors is being, you are in the room, then kind of proactively be their sponsor, be an advocate for them to say, I work with this individual. This is how I think this person really needs to try this new role. So sponsorship recognize that you have to do that work And even if that person has not reached out to you, it's okay. You can still be a sponsor unofficially and then say, like, hey, I'm advocating for you. You better show up. Like I do that all the time. You better show up. You're doing a good job. So that is how I think you can evolve from mentorship and become a sponsor as well.
I appreciate that. That's so cool. And I want to, so for me, from a personal experience, you kind of speaking to how you might not have the skill set, but you have the platform to actually advocate for certain things. For example, because I also serve as the director of professional development for the Black Employee Network, in Nigeria for AWS, and we just launched a Africans in Tech mentorship program where we had over 75 Amazonians just looking to how do we help build and upskill folks in Africa. And the sign up and the reaction was just awesome. So I think that's me having that platform to build programs and scale those programs. We're able to actually launch up something of that scale. So I really do see like, hey, it's just, are you willing to do the work and also look at the impact as well? So I really do appreciate that. I think my next question goes to looking at the other side now. So for like young, professionals who are new in like, the game, and they're looking to, how do I go about this? Do I have to have like a Rolodex? I don't know if those still exist anymore, of like mentors, or like a spreadsheet and go for like coffee chats every time. So from your experience, knowing how important you have to start to establish a strong network of mentors and sponsors. So for the young professionals who are actually coming into the employment market, how do they go about to stand out and catch the attention of potential mentors and sponsors? Jones,
I think, well, one, leverage your alumni network. Most of us are college educated, and therefore you're related. You have some sort of alumni network that you can leverage. That's number one. Inside of your company, there are likely people who went to the same university as you. Two of my mentors at AT&T both went to Florida State, and that's an easy one. Also, engage in maybe industry organizations. And those you can leverage in your company, even if the company is not the sponsor of the industry organization, whether it's Agile or Six Sigma or some engineering society, or build your own community. Early career parents, right? Come up with an idea to where you can build community amongst people like that who have something in common.
I mean, I think I share the same sentiment. And building on that, like, big corporates would often have these like alumni network, formal societies, if not set them up. But even if you're not, and to reach out a broader audience, if you're not part of bigger corporate, there are societies outside where there are meetups. And again, invest in yourself, sign up for membership, go attend these seminars or go attend these conferences. That would give you an opportunity to meet people, develop relationships. And again, this is where they are doing a lot of informal networks. So for example, University of Washington, I'm in Seattle, and they have a group of University of Washington for Women Network, and I once in a while, occasionally, I attend that. I was part of at Amazon when very early in my career, to the point like there were not enough women network, and so we kind of came together and said, let's have something that would advance women and help navigate different life stages at Amazon, right? So just doubling down on this, like, there are enough opportunities. If you're not in big corporate, even in your local community, there are a lot of these opportunities. Pay for them, attend those series. And honestly, if you don't see something, that's where your entrepreneurial spirit comes in. Go start something, because you're not alone. That is the biggest thing I've learned. If you are suffering, you're not the only one. There are more people like you who want to kind of do something, learn something, and you will always find someone to help you out.
Mhm. Hey, I wanted to add something on, because I know George also mentioned about how does somebody, make themselves stand out, because there's a lot of people who are doing these things where they're getting themselves joined into these organizations. But then, I think if we've all been there, right? If there's networking events, there's a bunch of circles, and then you try to figure out how to get into that circle, and then, just kind of make yourself known, have the spotlight on you instead of just kind of hiding in the crowd. So, and for me personally, it's been kind of like reflecting back on yourself and what makes you authentic and then genuine. And so that's way you kind of build your story. So do you have any like a framework or personal examples of where you've been in that situation, and then kind of figure out what your unique angle is, so that way you stand out amongst the crowd.
I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
Volunteer for those events. That's the best way to kind of work with these people. Again, like if you're right, you're standing in that circle,
Yeah.
you don't even get a time to talk to that group of people. But if you're volunteering, again, investing your time, you're volunteering, you get to meet people before the scene, you're helping set up, you're doing something together, people get to know you that way. Just that's my one tip. Like, and everyone's looking for volunteer. So
Yep,
I'll,
I'll double down on that. I believe the world works on sowing and reaping. What comes around goes around. Karma, the world works that way, in my opinion. So if you sow your time, if
Yeah.
you plant those seeds, then it'll come back around for you for sure.
I
I
like
agree
yeah,
that.
with you.
I think that's a myth that people like, oh, people are going to notice me somehow, and people are going to start advocating me. And if I talk to someone and they will and tell them they're going to be sponsored, in fact, that's my biggest pet peeve, just to be honest. But I don't, and I just want to make sure it's not. These are the organic relationships is because you are working with someone, they have examples to talk about you.
Mhm.
Like if you just say be my sponsor without having any context, it's very hard. It's like foundational work of getting to know each other, working together, and then building over time. So like it's a age old advice, give your karma, right? You have to invest time to get more rewards in the long term.
That's good. So I know we've talked a lot about from an individual perspective and how can we offer these tips and strategies to somebody. But now let's kind of switch into more of an organization, as there might be somebody in this audience that might be part of that, they can be an advocate for their entire organization. So how can organizations now create a culture that supports both mentorship and sponsorship? What do you feel like, where where do you feel like the roles of the leadership can play in that, fostering these type of relationships within the company? So Yuanza, if you wanted to start off that one. Yeah.
Well, number one, employee resource groups or employee groups are an excellent way for companies to go about doing that. And I would tell you, a company that's rich in its tenure of having employee resource groups, those groups won't just consist of one demographic, right?
Mhm.
Uh, I'm part of Oxygen here at AT&T, which is an early career employee resource group. I'm part of Women of AT&T, which is a Women of Finance, excuse me, which is a organization to foster and support women growing in finance. So I'm part of that organization. So in its richness in depth, it's not solely dedicated to a certain demographic.
Mhm.
Um, uh, Another thing, speed networking events help open the door. And I'll say one last thing. I won't elaborate on it because Shruti mentioned it earlier. Peer mentors.
Mhm.
Um, and Shruti, maybe you can expand on your experience there, since you mentioned earlier. But peer mentors is another great way for companies to create mentorship relationships amongst their folks.
I mean, I would just add on to say organizations and leaders should be thoughtful and say like, hey, these are our top talent that we want to invest in.
Mhm.
Kind of create those kind of talk to your peers to say this person needs a better mentor, or are you engaging in the mentors again, creating those networking events, sponsoring some of these proactive engagement to say, hey, please connect, please talk, please help out this individual, so that that first kind of ease out that burden of that uncomfortable emails and communication we talked about. If the organizations can proactively, and as a leaders, you can proactively do this. I think the other place the organization can really help is during onboarding and talent, like to say, hey, these are your, like, as you are coming new to Amazon, we have this embark plan, which would say, who are your peer mentors? That's why I keep using this. Like, who are your kind of like someone who is similar in your kind of tenure or similar roles who can help you navigate these? These are your early mentors, and then you know how to navigate Amazon, for example, in the first 1 year and use them. So kind of having those what I call in Amazon speak, it's mechanism, but those are the formal ways where we can organizations can say, do you have those embark plan? Do they have a designated mentor? Because when you come in new, not just within this role, by the way, new to Amazon, I insist, for example, even someone coming in within Amazon, but new to the role, it's Amazon is a big company as well, right? Like you have different businesses. They don't know how to navigate AWS. Make sure those kind of peer mentors slash people are available for those new people, and that kind of becomes a jumping off point for many folks to build those relationships.
I love that. I love that. And it resonates because I think, how our neighbor and I, we built our friendship was because we joined AT&T as FLDPs, and we built a program called Lead. And it was just us from a bias for action standpoint. We say, hey, we have so many young folks and wanted to build a way to give them a platform to like engage with like leadership and learn more about the company. So I appreciate that. That's actually so cool. And just to stay within the organizational angle, sponsorship, like for my purview, this is me personally, I think it can be a powerful tool for advancing the careers of women, underrepresented groups. And these groups, we find out, like often face like barriers, like from a unique standpoint for like reaching like some high level leadership roles. So I'll say, this question, I would love to start with you, Shruti. How can sponsorship truly break the glass ceiling from your experience? You've been in Amazon for over a decade. So do you see sponsorship, and how have you seen the impact of sponsorship so far? And I want to also add a follow-up as well. What steps do you think, with what you see, and what steps do you think can be taken to actually advance this as well?
It's a great question and a very hard one to answer as well. So just kind of, I appreciate that question as well. Um, I think I'm definitely reaped a lot of benefit for sponsorship over my 10 years here, 13 years, sorry, 13 years here. And I started in the FLDP program at Amazon, for those, just my quick background, and navigating that FLDP program, right, to getting to where I am leading large organizations. I don't think I would have done it without the mentorship and sponsorship. So being here is my way of paying that
Yeah.
those group forward. Like, how did they help me? And I want to make sure I make that happen. But breaking glass ceiling, coming back to the point here, how that helped me is sponsors, especially,
Mm.
help break the unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is an area that is very well studied and very well recognized, that there are good intentions don't help, right? And when these glass ceilings are there because there is unconscious bias for multiple reasons, there is this people who look like me, people who have access to the network. Sponsors help break those barriers down to say, hey, maybe you don't have this data point. One of the active ways to do this is you don't have this data point, and you kind of become an advocate. That's a direct way of saying you're bringing in different perspectives in these conversations for these groups and saying, bias buster, I don't think you have understand this. This is what is happening. This person's navigating this life situation. And despite all of that, this person has been delivering this. Let's kind of make sure that we are having an equal kind of assessment, rather than using these against it. So to me, I'm just kind of going to say sponsors are important mechanism for organizations if they truly want to bust unconscious bias.
Mm.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shruti, you just nailed it. I love what you just said. I need a button for if I get a bias buster button, that would be great. In fact, I gotta figure that one out. But quite frankly, sponsorship can be tricky because it's elusive and it's difficult and oftentimes undefined, right? And so you've got to be very intentional about trying to establish that. And it's difficult for companies to create that. And really, it's about cultivating relationships, and companies often depend on you to discover the elusive. And when you can do that, you're doing. Most time, companies aren't just going to go out and say, "Hey, here's a sponsor for you." Right? This is your sponsor. A sponsor has to know your work. Okay, that's number one. If I'm going to advocate for you, if somebody's going to be in a room talking about you and enabling your visibility and promotion and career advancement, they've got to know your work, right? And so oftentimes people think that a mentor or a relationship that you've cultivated with someone that's in a senior role can get you there. But if they don't know your work, then they don't have the ability to really speak and advocate on your behalf. So you got to find ways in order to expose your mentors becoming sponsors to your work.
Yeah, and it also kind of goes back to, right, if you've been fortunate and blessed enough, you've had that sponsorship, and meant that you've been working towards. And then the work doesn't stop there. It's more of, if you doing the genuine work, that for them to even accept you to be advocating for you. And then now you're having to, um, you know, you can't just feel like you're in graduation mode and then just, take that senior year or whatever. It's more of, you got to put in the work and then make sure that you're having that, the type of work that you might be presenting, it has much more exposure now, that you have to put in those extra hours to make sure that it is, um, really kind of defined as a, like a final project that you're about to present. And so that way you're putting yourself in good shoes, and so that way you're able to look good for your mentor or your sponsor.
Yeah, and I
um
think,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
To build on one of the subtle points, and I know I'm talking from Amazon speak, but I assume this is most of the corporates would have that. You need to take different rotations, which I call it rotations, but different roles within your organization to build that diverse group of mentors and sponsors. Some individuals early in their career are very much like, I'm going to stay here and just grow vertically. That does not happen. You need to take different roles, because then what happens is you have different people, and I know I have personally benefited from it, because I get to hear this is like, oh, this person was advocating, somehow knows you, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I worked with them 5 years ago in this role. That's how they know me, right? So your sponsors, they may not be directly knowing you, or you don't even realize it that's happening, because you have worked with them, they know your work, and somehow they are, you have been in touch with them. But because you have now worked in different departments, different roles, you just have the broader set of mentors and sponsors who naturally kind of, again, you are doing the hard work, but be intentional in your rotations as well. Don't just assume I'm going to stay in this organization forever. I actually have a kick me out policy in my team. I'm like, you have done this too far too long. Go find something else. Or that your question earlier, organizations can be very proactive on those conversations as well. So
Okay. I know we've opened the floor for Q&A, but the floor is kind of shy right now. So we'll just start with a question that would be just fun to ask. So we were thinking, there, like, what sort of some strategies would you say for maintaining that long term, to make it mutually beneficial for that relationship, mentor and sponsor? Because, like, I feel like talking about work, and having that working relationship can kind of get stale, like, because because the initial conversation started off with that common interest and stuff. I mean, what are you, or do you set certain boundaries? Like, let's just say, Jawanza, you and I like to golf. Would you go golfing with that person, or do you keep that relationship kind of structured and not cross that boundary?
Yeah, golfing is an easy example of how to stay networked and connected with somebody. However, the majority of people don't play golf, so you got to think of other ways. I've got a mentor of mine who is fascinated by mergers and acquisitions. Okay, and so whenever there's something in the news in that space, I'll ping him and just ask his opinion, or yeah, it's a topic I know that's of interest to him. So Verizon is about to purchase Frontier, or at least they're attempting to. That's something that I sent him a text and said, hey, saw this in the news. What do you think? It's just a way to stay in touch. And so find things like that, whether it's common ground or things that people will have interest in, and use that. Sports are a great way of doing that. Golf being an example.
How about you? Yeah, what do you do?
I just to keep it fun, I often say send wine. If you know that person enjoys a good wine, I always say, yeah, let's go on a wine date. But I think there are other ways. Like, I think that is kind of building on the keeping an organic way of preserving a relationship. After a time, you know those personal preferences, and you kind of start exchanging those things. So one of my favorite ways to do it, and I'm a immigrant here, but I love holiday cards tradition, and I've adopted that in my kind of circle, and I send out notes to my, I use that holiday card as a touch point to say, hey, I've been thinking of you, and I make sure I send a personal note with some of my mentors and sponsors to say, hey, this year was phenomenal, I've been thinking of you on these aspects. So that becomes my organic touch point. And then once in a while, like, you see something, you remember something, you reach out to them, how you've been thinking, would love your thoughts on it. Or I'm So that's how you keep it going. I think it is I'm totally okay to your question, and like I'm not into golfing to your other point, but I love books, I love gardening. So people swing by and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" Right?
Yeah.
And oh, I got this books I read for you. I read this book, and I'm going to get it for you. So that was one of my ways to keep in touch with my sponsor. And he would be like, I don't have time to read this book. I'm like, no, 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 no. You read these 2 pages, you will really love it. And he would be like, this is awesome. Thank you. Right? So you find those common points earlier, and you do the foundational work, and then most of the mentors and sponsors will kind of start engaging even at that personal level, and it's again you will see that that's how you know it's you have a trusted long-term relationship.
Brilliant. I love that. First, I love the wine angle. I never had thought about that. That's actually such a cool way to stay in connection. But it does make sense because I think most people, what sort of makes that relationship fizzle out if there's no organic feel to it. If it feels like, hey, I just want to get something from you every time, people can kind of see them through that. Because if you're speaking to like a leader who leads teams, they can see them through anything. So that does make sense. I do want to kind of lighten things up a bit because, again, thank you so much for all the insights. But I feel we should end on a really cool note because, again, why wouldn't it be funny if we don't try to kind of explore your personal side? And I think sometimes that unexpected traits, experiences, I think that's how we kind of work and lead our team. So I do want to start off with you, Shruti. What is a fun fact about yourself and that your colleagues do not know about, and how has this unique part of you influenced how you work in any so surprising way?
uh After I've been here too long, so I think people know I'm a very open book person, so people know me a lot. But I think in recent years, people won't know that I used to be a long distance runner. So I've run one full marathon, and I used to run half marathon every year for a while. But the fun fact is, I never did that before I joined Amazon. And I always thought I'm not an outdoorsy person till I came to Seattle. And why it has helped me, I reflect back on that to remind myself that there is no such thing that I can't do. If I decide to put my mind on it, if I decide to put effort in it, I can do it. Like running a full marathon, I just have to put in one foot in front of the other, literally, and in my mind. Like I don't let something define me. And that is something that I've learned by for myself, and it has really helped me whenever I think, oh my God, this is impossible.
Mhm.
No, if I can do this, I can do a lot of other things. I just have to put my mind, get the right help, get the right resources, but I can do it.
Love
So
that.
I like that. Tronzon, do you care to share?
George, a fun fact for me, um, I have a key to the city of El Paso, Texas.
Whoa.
And I've only been to El Paso one time in my life. So that's my fun fact. When I was in college, I actually joined the fraternity Kappa Alpha Psi. The mayor of El Paso was a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, and I was traveling to El Paso. They asked me to speak at this program. When he found out about it, he came to the program, gave me a key to the city and some Lucchese boots that I still wear. Now that I live in Texas, they've become more handy.
That's funny.
Oh, by the way, how has that helped me? I do think there's two things when it comes to these fun facts. Throughout your career, you'll be in these environments where they ask you for a fun fact. Two types of fun facts that I think are very important. One is something that people can relate to, right? Shruti and a long distance runner. That's great. It's something people can relate to, and you can build relationships off of that. A second thing would be something that professionally is stimulating. Like for me, I use the key to the city of El Paso. It's like, whoa, that's major. That's so. Those are the two types of fun facts you should create and share when you're in networking environments.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Hey, I know we were saying that um, we had a few questions from the Q&A, so I did want to bring at least one before we close out the conversation since we're kind of near the tail end of it. So here's a question from Jaden Watt. What is the best way to ensure that people recognize your work and give you the feedback for it? I like that question, Ron. If anybody wants to start, yeah, feel free to just hop on.
I think number one, in terms of recognizing your work and getting feedback, a gift that very few people take advantage of is the ability to ask for feedback. So that's number one. Um, It can be humbling, but it's often, for some reason or another, overlooked. But asking for feedback is a form of being curious. And if
Mhm.
you can incorporate curiosity and questions into your toolkit, it can go a long way. And so if you want feedback, if you want to hear, you ask for it.
Nothing more to add. Just that's how you know this is your work, because now you're seeking feedback, you're going to improve on it, and that's how people are going to recognize it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've done this personally where I've always set up those one-on-ones, and do it. I mean, whether it's if someone it's more with much more exposure, and so you can't require that in maybe like once a week, but maybe it's once a month or once a quarter is like that's how I've approached it. I don't know if you would advise that way too, or other schedules or other means of scheduling those. Okay. I know we've had a lot of questions asked, and you've shared a lot of valuable advice and insights as well. I did want to take this kind of time just to summarize on what we've talked about, just so we can kind of put the bow on this entire conversation. And so we start off with the mentorship and what's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship. I love what you all said. If it's the difference really is mentorship is like a coach, it's someone working with you, while sponsorship is that champion who's working for you. So it's like that advocate or that influence. And then talking about how do we find that right mentor, and it's more finding that common ground. So I think we related it back to, hey, what are those extra interests that, because I know understand like when we used to write our resumes near the end, that there used to be that interest. It's that where those that last little bullet points that you can find that common ground where you can find that start quick conversation starter, and then kind of get into more of whether it be cooking, gardening, or golfing, or even something as M&A, that where you can connect on something. And that's always helpful to have that. And it really starts from that curiosity and investing in yourself. I know we talked about that, where you want to, the more you read, the more the courses you're paying for, or even the sources that are out there, it's really helpful to take advantage of those, invest in yourself, so that way you're more marketable in front of these leaders, these mentors and sponsors. So that way you can connect on something, you can actually have a good conversation about it, and so that way you will be able to advance your career, help find that champion for you. And then I know we talked about how do we figure out and find these mentors and sponsors. It's talking about, you start maybe from your network, your alumni, joining these employee resource groups, joining external employee resource groups, or other volunteering organizations. And we talked about also how do we make ourselves stand out, be that volunteer, be that person who puts in the work. And then that kind of relates to what we were talking about, investing in yourself or investing in putting that time into those organizations will really help to stand out, get that recognition from those mentors and sponsors, and really kind of work for itself. And then I know we talked about, as an organization, how do we create this environment? And it comes back to these leaders that are creating these avenues for advocation is through by whether it's like Shruti, you mentioned, like there's that first day, the embarkment, and how you uh, are given some sort of a list of people that you want to reach out to, or even going about what sort of steps you want to go do, and go and act upon it. And then it's going back to the stuff that we all talked about is really how do you differentiate the mentor and sponsor, and then figuring out who you want to be as your coach and who do you want to be as your mentor. And then that's pretty much it. And I like that you all really gave us the time for sharing about yourselves, but also how you all advanced in your career, because these personal experiences and these conversations really help for the people who don't have an idea, or they might have that initial idea, but if you haven't really gotten they haven't really gone into the details on how. And I feel like both of you've done a really good job on sharing the blueprint on how to go about it. I know personally, I've gotten a lot of advice from this, and I reflect back to like what I was saying earlier. Um, you know, talked to my brother earlier, and seeing how went about life, and that helps me find that blueprint. And I feel like both of you have given that blueprint for our audience. So thank you so much.
I appreciate that. And for me, before I go to reflections, I just want to say, I think you missed out the part about the wine. That's just the best gem that has been dropped today. And also, I would love to get the link of where you got that prop from, John. So that +1 button, I would love to have that in meetings. That was also the best thing. But as we close, I'll say, please take a moment to reflect on today's key takeaways. We explored not just mentorship, sponsorship. We also explore things that you can start to do now to actually drive your path forward with like your career. So you literally own it in your hand. So with this insights we spoke of, I want you to go ahead, build those impactful relationships. We hope you are inspired to put these strategies into play in your own journey. So thank you for being part of this conversation. Stay connected with us by following Dapper Dollars on LinkedIn, our social media channels, and also visiting our website for updates and other key resources. So as we leave, I'll say keep learning, keep connecting, and continue to elevate your career. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.